Hola, in this video we're going to talk about the present perfect tense, el presente perfecto. And an example of this tense is the phrase he viajado a España, which in English means I have traveled to Spain. Now, before we dive too deep into how we conjugate the verbs and how we form these phrases, let's talk about what the present perfect even mean. Because while technically it's a tense in the present tense, it seems a lot like actions that happened in the past. So let's take a look at what this phrase would look like in the preterite. So if we were to use the preterite, the phrase would be viajé a España, which if we draw a little timeline looks something like this. Here's the present tense. Here's the line between the present and the past. So the phrase viajé a España from the preterite would look something like this. There's some moment in the past where this happened. Could be 2 years ago, could be 10 years ago, could be yesterday, but at one particular moment in the past this happened. Well, this is not at all what we're talking about with the present perfect. Present perfect looks more like this. We have the present, and then the line between the present and the past. So the phrase he viajado a España, meaning I have traveled to Spain, means that this event of traveling to Spain happened at some point in the past. We're not really being specific as to when it happened. We're not really stating very clearly that it happened in the past, it's over. We're just saying that at some point I have done this. And it could have been multiple times. It could have been a repeated action. But really it's just saying that it's a statement of truth in the present tense. That it is true in the present that I have traveled to a certain place. So it seems like it's talking about events in the past, although technically it's a present tense. All right, so let's talk about the steps of how to conjugate it. So step one is to use the form of the verb haber. Haber is what we call the auxiliary verb, or the helper verb, which is the first part in our present perfect conjugations. And it is very irregular. So the yo form for haber is a. The to form, as. The él, ella, usted form, a. The nosotros form, hemos. The ellos, ellas, ustedes form is an. And then the vosotros form, which is used in Spain, habéis, which is the only form that makes it look like it's a regular verb. So you can see haber is very regular, very irregular. And the next couple steps are to conjugate our infinitive. And we put that into the past participle form. So the way that we do that is take your infinitive, take off the last two letters, like we've always done before, but don't forget about the fact that it was an AR verb. And then you copy your stem, which you're following along is actually step 3. First is to use the form of haber. Second step is to cross off the AR, or the infinitive ending. Third step is to use our stem that's remaining. And then the fourth and final step is to add our past participle ending. For an AR verb, we use ado. So for those AR verbs, just so you can see it here, ado is the ending. For ER and IR verbs, the ending is ido. So for example, I have spoken, he hablado, or we could say, you guys have eaten, ustedes han comido. Comer being an ER verb means that we use the past participle ending ido with that one. And now one thing that gets a little confusing is we're used to this idea of conjugate stop, where if you have two verbs close to each other, then you only conjugate the first one, leaving the second verb in the regular infinitive form. Now you'll notice that we obviously aren't doing that in the present perfect tense. Well, the reason is because in those other conjugate stop examples, we were really only doing the first action. So in a statement like quiero viajar a España, I want to travel to Spain. In that moment, the only thing you're actually doing is wanting. You're not traveling to Spain because you're saying that you want to travel to Spain. So that's why we only conjugate the quiero. So jumping back to our first example, he viajado a España, well, both of those actions is what we're talking about. We're talking about whether I have traveled to Spain or not. So the having done something and the traveling is the verb that we're talking about. So we actually do conjugate both of those verbs technically. I know there are a couple weird things that happen with a handful of verbs, such as leer, to read, creer, and creer meaning to believe, and oír meaning to listen. So when we conjugate the verb leer in the present perfect, let's say for the yo form, we have he leído. Now we have to stress the I, but if we don't have an accent, it would actually be pronounced he leído, so we do need to add an accent. So any ER or IR verbs that have a vowel right in front of that infinitive ending need to add an accent to the I in ido. That way we actually put the right emphasis where it needs to be. He leído, I have read. Han creído, they have believed. Hemos oído, we have heard. Now, are there irregular verbs in the present perfect? No, answer is yes, but that is the subject for another video. Alright, so let's do a little practice. So take each of these examples, conjugate the verb in the present perfect tense for the given subject. So I suggest you do this on your paper, pause the video, and then when you're finished doing the practice, start playing the video again so you can see the answers. Alright, so now let's start to go over the answers. Comer yo, I have eaten. He comido. Now, we've seen the example he viajado a España, so you're thinking, why isn't it he comado? Well, that's because comer is an ER verb. For AR verbs, you use ado. For ER and IR verbs, you use ido at the end. And don't forget that we do need that first verb there. It's the yo form, so we use that form of haber meaning to have done something. Number 2, nadar nosotros hemos nadado. We have swum, and I'm not going to lie to you, I had to look that one up because I started to say we have swam, and I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. So in English, we do a lot of weird things too. All right, number 3, beber, to has bebido, you have drunk, another one of those words that you kind of have to look up in English because it doesn't sound quite right. And I want to stress up to this point that you do need to have that first word there, the hemos, the as. It's not an optional word. Like you might think that yo and tu and el, a lot of times you don't need, these forms of haber do need to be there for you to say that you have done something. All right, number 4, escuchar, ustedes. Ustedes han escuchado. You all have listened. And then estudiar, ella. Ella ha estudiado. She has studied. Right? Gracias por mirar. Nos vemos en el futuro.